The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast. Here is the King of Podcasts.
And welcome to episode 292 of the Broadcasters Podcast. This is KOP with you. So this is the second time you're going to catch an episode of yours truly here on the feed because I have another episode to put out today. And let me just give you a heads up. So there's a couple of big stories that happened in the world of media that was worth talking about this week. One of those I just happened to be on with my friend Lupe, who I hope to have an interview with in an upcoming episode. He's a radio journeyman, has been on every major radio market there is, and has worked at so many different radio stations. You know, a lot of this is fill-in talent, but that's been his specialty. He's done a lot of work where, in a pinch, when they need somebody to go and come in for some of the biggest names in talk radio, he's been there. And that's what he really does, especially. And I hope to go ahead and have him tell his whole story, which will be a lot. I'll probably have to go through a couple of parts just to get to it. But I was on with him. He was guest hosting on 1210 WPHT. As you know, I've already been on with him a couple of times. So shout out to at Lupe Show on Twitter, or X, if you want to go and follow him. And he's been really generous with his time to get me up there and fill in an hour when it comes to media and entertainment talk. And this week on Tuesday, I talked with him about the whole sensation. I mean, really just this anomaly that is Oliver Anthony, that was able to bring his song Rich Man North of Richmond to the top of the Billboard charts this week. He had already reached the top of the iTunes charts, but like I said, Billboard is the Bible of music. That is the one that counts. If he reached number one in Billboard all of a sudden and has never had any chart history whatsoever, because not only with that, he had a couple of those songs that also reached up in the charts. So if you want to listen to the whole story about Oliver Brown and his rise to number one with Rich Man North of Richmond, go ahead and check out the episode. It's the last episode that just came out here, and it's an extra episode I put out. Broadcasters Podcast. You can look for it at kingofpodcasts.com, where all my episodes are. kingofpodcasts.com, that's where you find it. Now, that said, there's other stuff I brought up about the actors' strike, the writer's strike. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, because there's been more that has happened, where we have heard from the Alliance of Motion Picture TV Producers. They have actually given out more information as part of their negotiations with the writers. And eventually we'll get to learn more about the actors and what they're getting out of all this. But the writers are naturally the people being negotiated with, and then the actors alongside. But the writers, if they get their deal in, then the actors would probably follow suit. But what we have so far is it was released by to the press by the AMPTP, obviously to get something to kind of move along to where the strike is, as a showing of them trying to show that they're trying to make amends. They're trying to create progress. But that story and others are not the stories I'm going to go and focus on at the very start. We have to talk about Scooter Braun, because this shit has been hitting the fan all week long, and we need to get to this here because it's nonstop. And we really don't know what he's done. But apparently, Scooter Braun is losing representation from some of the biggest pop stars in music. Something happened here. And listen, in a climate right now when anybody can get to the top of the charts, as we see right now, any of Scooter Braun's current clients are not in the top three at the moment. Of course, and one of them is a former client who has done very well after leaving, after what happened in the first place, Taylor Swift. Of course, the darling of this program that we've talked about the last couple of weeks. Listen, was it my idea to go ahead and keep talking about Taylor Swift? I don't know, but you know what? She keeps getting herself headlines. She has declined, apparently, to do the Super Bowl this year, or to come this coming year, and why should she? And we make the point of that. I made that point last week when I talked to Lupe, or actually a couple weeks ago. Listen, all I keep doing is like, she's the big star. And I put this prediction. I said, you know what? For those that want to try to say that Taylor Swift is about as big a star as Michael Jackson, well, for this generation, she's getting there. I just wouldn't need to see what that world tour looks like when she makes the rounds all around the world and see what happens, because that could be very well the biggest change of it all, where she'll be in the argument with Michael Jackson. How about that? Is that good enough, Swifties? Any of you listening? Hopefully that is, because that's the best I can tell you. Because Michael Jackson's still up there, and of course I'm, a child of the 80s. I'm gonna say that about him because that's where it is. Like, I heard all the music, a lot of it. I was alive for most of it, except for the Jackson 5 stuff and I was too young to really understand, to really appreciate the end of the Jackson 5 and the whole disco stuff that was going on with Destiny and, Shake Your Body and all this kind of stuff. And, I was just, a little baby back then. But anyway, Scooter Braun, there's a lot of people he represents, but let's first tell you who he is. If you don't know who he is, we're going to take a story from inews.co.uk, and Emily Boodle did a very good job comprehensively of explaining who this is. So Scooter Braun is a music manager, entrepreneur, and executive who in 2019 purchased the label Big Machine Records, distributed by Universal Records. And it created the highly publicized dispute surrounding the ownership of Taylor Swift and her masters, a scandal that now sees her re-recording each of her albums because she was signed to Big Machine Records. And thus, Scooter Braun, buying the company, was able to go ahead and get the contracts of all those stars underneath it. Now, Billboard has reported this week that more besides Taylor Swift who had already left, and that was a whole spat on that. But right now, more of the stars that he represents are leaving him. Ariana Grande and Demi Lovato have allegedly cut ties. Frozen star Idina Menzel of Frozen fame has also reported to have left. J Balvin, the Colombian reggaeton singer, has also split with them in May. He's now being managed by Roc Nation. And Justin Bieber, there's rumors that he's also no longer working with Scooter Braun, but that's been denied so far. Now, Scooter Braun went on to X, and he tried to make a joke about it, saying, "Breaking news, I'm no longer managing myself." So everybody needs to know who Scooter Braun is. I'll go ahead and take it here. Scott Scooter Braun, born 1981 in New York City to Jewish-American parents. His grandparents, originally from Hungary, were both Holocaust survivors. He studied at Emory University in Atlanta, dropped out when the rapper and producer Jermaine Dupri asked him to join work at his record label, So Death, in 2002. So he goes back 20-plus years. After 4 years, he left to pursue his own marketing business and started scooping up talent, notably Justin Bieber. He saw him in a YouTube video when Bieber was just 12 years old, and then his company SB Projects started signing other names. Ariana Grande, Demi Lovato, J Balvin, and then eventually Kanye West, Carly Rae Jepsen, and David Guetta. So really not a lot of people have talked about Scooter Braun before because he's always been in the background. But Big Machine was a label that Taylor Swift was a part of that was runs by Scott Borchetta. He founded it in 2005 and specialized in country and pop. In 2018, Taylor Swift signed a new deal with Republic Records, and it controlled her music. When Braun purchased Big Machine for $330 million via his investment company Ithaca in 2019, Borchetta would stay on as CEO. The ownership of Swift's master recordings, the part of the label owns, distinct from the intellectual property, transferred automatically to him. He would profit from every royalty that Taylor Swift had from her albums and those songs. She tried to buy her masters from Big Machine before the sale went through, and that would involve staying with them rather than moving on to Republic Records. And she said, quote at the time, "I was given an opportunity to sign back up to Big Machine Records and earn one album back at a time for every one that I turned in, every new album." And she wrote on Tumblr when Braun took ownership, saying she only had found out about the sale at the same time as the general public. Quote, "I walked away because I knew once I signed that contract, Scott Borchetta would sell the label, selling me and my future." And in the same post, she described Braun as a manipulative bully. And Braun's prior involvement with Kanye West, which he also represented, meant, according to Swift, he was involved in Swift's high-profile dispute with the rapper the previous year. Scooter has stripped me of my life's work. Now, the Scooter Braun story allows us to understand why is she re-recording her albums? Why is she having to go through all this now? And that's why. The details of the reports remain murky, but a source with Variety says that the split between Lovato and Braun, Demi Lovato and Braun, was amicable. He wished her a happy birthday on Instagram and at the weekend. But the alleged split with Ariana Grande is unclear, and she's got a new album coming out. New album coming out, I believe, and nothing's been said about if there's any confirmation on that. And so more of what's being said about this goes like this. He made the list of Billboard's 30 Under 30 in 2009. He was promoting parties in Atlanta initially, and that's when Jermaine Dupri found him and brought him on the So So Def. Justin Bieber is basically the reason why he has his career today. And so, as you notice, she has been re-recording all the songs to the albums, recording the albums that were now owned by Scooter Braun, which is her initial self-titled album in 2006, Fearless 2008, Speak Now 2010, Red 2012, 1989, 2014, Reputation 2017. So we move along to what Variety has said about this. They go on to say that the situation has reached a strange netherworld of off-the-record confirmations and denials, where one set of sources say one thing and the other says the opposite. Most likely, no one is telling the whole truth. Representatives are stonewalling, insiders are climbing up fast. Some sources tell Variety that Bieber and Grande are not leaving the company, but rather Braun is continuing to step back from day-to-day management to focus on his role as CEO of Hybe American, which is a South American entertainment giant behind K-pop titans BTS, to which he sold Ithaca Holdings, the parent company, for his Scooter Braun Projects management business for over $1 billion in 2021. So he's just kept the upgrade and upgrade. He's made a lot of money off these artists as a result. And the source says that, quote, all of Scooter Braun's clients are under contract and negotiations have been ongoing for months, and Scooter stepping into the larger role as Hybe America CEO. And people are spreading rumors based on what they know, but they are off. Scooter's team at SP Projects are both handling Justin and Ariana as they work through what this new structure looks like. And complicating matters now is that Braun, who has been one of the most powerful music people in the music business for more than a decade, garnered so much ill will and envy in his rise to the top that the situation has gotten a snowballing mob mentality. The schadenfreude is so strong and foes want him to fail so badly that people lose perspective. Not helping matters is Braun's fervent desire to be seen as a good guy and his formidable ability to spin narratives in his favor. The agendas and interests of the involved parties, including apparently some media outlets, have only clouded the matter further. One source says he's imploding. He's getting out of management. He has been for years. That's the real story. You just can't be, it's a different world since the pandemic. You just can't be an asshole like that anymore. And several sources tell Variety that Braun has been only tangentially involved in the careers of even his biggest artists in recent years, with SP Projects' longtime executives handling the demanding day-to-day work of managing major artists, what he takes the credit for, right? So the CEO of a company valued at $11 billion presumably would not have time for such attention, even though Bieber and Grande have been relatively inactive in recent years. Well, unfortunately, Grande's been working on Wicked, and she's just been away. But remember, she put out so much music before she did the movie, right? And then Bieber, right now, he has this unfortunate affliction, which looks kind of very much like Bell's palsy. And, I don't know. We only wish for the best for him because, of course, he's taking a break. And it's probably more important for him to do that more than anything. So his first major move as CEO of Hybe America was acquiring the Atlanta hip-hop powerhouse Quality Control, which is home to Migos, Little Baby, Little Yachty, and others for $320 million. A big cluster right there. A big entourage of hip-hop talent. It's unclear what artists say parting ways or no longer being with Braun might look like. By the age of 40, Braun has achieved many of his David Geffen-sized ambitions, ushering several artists to superstardom, organizing One Love Manchester, a major charity concert starring Ariana Grande, Bieber, Coldplay, Katy Perry, Mac Miller, Miley Cyrus, and more, in the wake of a 2017 Paris bombing outside of Ariana Grande concert in which 22 people died in just 2 weeks. Yeah, so the positive press publicity probably would help him somewhat. His reputation took a hit because of the Taylor Swift issues acquiring the rights to her first 6 albums. And he has spoken, Scooter has spoken about how much money his artists and executives made on the deal as shareholders of the company. According to a corporate filing from Hybe, Braun's artists and staff, including Grande, Bieber, Balvin, and Lovato, received shares, totaling $161 million. And he and Scott Borchetta got the lion's share, receiving what amounts to $86.2 billion. Borchetta getting $31.1 million of it. Braun getting $86 million alone, and Borchetta $31 million. And Grande and Bieber earned $11 million apiece. So yeah, as management, of course, he's taking a very big take. And, music, we already know that it's kind of the screw job that's already in play. Is it safe to say that Scooter Braun is a modern-day Tom Parker? Yes. He's Colonel Tom Parker in the new century. Totally. Meanwhile, J Balvin, who signed with Braun 18 months earlier, he got $4.1 million as a result of the switchover, and Lovato, $1 million. And by the way, Bieber's, the disease he's suffering from is a rare affliction called Ramsay Hunt disease. And Bieber, by the way, sold off most of the rights to his music to Hypnosis Sings last year, and the deal valued at around $200 million. Braun getting a hefty percentage as a result. He has not released an album since Justice in March 2021 and has dropped a handful of straight tracks in the intervening months. Whatever was left in his catalog, any promotional content that's out there. And as we mentioned, Grande has been working on the Universal Pictures big screen adaptation of the hit Broadway musical Wicked. It's not due to theaters until November 2024. And she hasn't released an album or solo single since Positions in October 2020. She made a couple of high-profile features with The Weeknd and others, and that's pretty much it. And also, other names we've mentioned about Kanye West, but also Kid Laroi has had on-again, off-again relationships with the company. But he is signing new clients, Scooter Braun, and as part of Hybe America. They just recently signed Ozuna, the Puerto Rican reggaeton superstar, and fast-rising rapper Kali as 2 of his latest signings. And Kali, that's the artist that most recently put out Area Codes. The remix of Area Codes from before. And she was also part in one of the songs of the Barbie soundtrack with Twice, right? There we go. I keep up with all this stuff. I keep up. I don't know what to think about all this, but you can pretty much kind of put it all together. One of the things you got to make mention of as well. Okay, so a number of those artists right there we've already mentioned. Maybe they're good. Their years of success, they're probably on the other side of the success. Okay, you're talking about Taylor Swift is probably peaking at her career right now. I mean, she doesn't stop because the advantage of being able to re-record her records really helps out because, while she's still, most likely going to work on new content, but to re-record the albums and put them out there and putting them out there as she has, she continues to do well. And the music does so well that, there are singles from the previous albums that are starting to go back up the chart again. So, she's just doing great. Cruel Summer becomes a proper single now, as all this has been said and done. So, good for her. More than that, you have to think about the fact that, okay, Ariana Grande's been in the ether for, over a decade right now with music, and it doesn't mean she's not slowing down. It's just that it's obvious that she's looking at other projects. So movies for her, she's done television. That's how she got into the business when we first learned about her. And then music became in the play. But we always know that Ariana Grande was multi-talented. She's also doing a lot in terms of marketing for her own products. I know she's doing perfumes and all, and that she's got other things that are in the works. She's just a business I mean, her whole brand, she's got a whole brand going on. With Justin Bieber, you know, the music takes a break because there's a choice of it. With Demi Lovato, she's just had a lot of issues. And she's been going through quite a bit of issues, which I imagine would be everything you would kind of expect, unfortunately, with a child star. She was young and had so many years in front of the camera and so many years in the spotlight, like to see where she's gone and where she is now. Same thing with Justin Bieber. You know, you see these stars and what they've gone through and how they've made their way through here. Scooter Braun being smart, being able to go ahead and diversify the lineup of people he has. And look, you know, the South Korean company right now, Hype America, decided to go ahead and bring him on. And they're going to take other artists established and make them big. He's doing it. And it works for them. Hey, if it works out and they can really figure out what will be the best course of action for these artists to build them into big stars. The problem is that right now, how many stars are out there these days? Because those names we talked about right now, they have been in the ether of pop music in the 2010s and into the 2020s. A lot of songs in their catalogs. And they've had radio that benefited with them. Because those are the artists that radio will absolutely benefit, will absolutely play, no doubt about. Right? When you see those artists and they have a new record, new album, whatever it is, hey, they're going to get played. No question. But they're not. I mean, they're going to get played by radio, but nobody else is going to get that kind of treatment. And that's where we are now. It's unfortunate. So everybody's been talking about this now. Everybody's been talking about it. It's been so much out there. By the way, one amazing stat that came out this week, talk of the charts. I love following these guys on X. They have so much good information. They also give me, I get to see predictions of the Billboard charts coming up, and they give you all these great stats. One stat they put out here was staggering. There's only been 2 songs on the radio songs chart on Billboard. So identifying the songs that are the most played on radio, the number 1 songs in the country on radio stations, according to Billboard. 2 songs in the last 6 months. In the last 6 months, that's it. Flowers by Miley Cyrus, which at the start of the year started at number 1. Well, after Taylor Swift's Antihero, let's put that point. Because Antihero crossed from the end of last year into the Christmas season and then into January, February. And then Flowers came in as the first real single of the year to hit number 1. And then Calm Down by Rema and Selena Gomez. That's it. But radio doesn't have anybody else they want to put. You know why? Because, again, if Justin Bieber had a new album right now or new singles to put out, they'd play it. But they're Ariana Grande, they have, okay, you can go ahead and keep playing, you know, the song they have with The Weeknd, the duet, but what else? I mean, you want to, you know, some of these radio stations, they don't always go back to play some of these artist songs and go back into the library so often. Like, they might not go all in the Ariana Grande's catalog so often to just replay the songs like they did. They put all these songs in power rotation, but right now they're probably not doing it so much. But I thought that stat was staggering when I saw that. Now, interesting from NPR, they put out a story this week also talking about Scooter Braun, and this is something they mentioned about that Scooter Braun is probably capable of curbing all this and to be able to go and turn around this, and he'll be able to go ahead and come out of this okay. Like, he can actually do crisis management and damage control. So Anna Silman reported for Business Insider last March about Scooter Braun that he possesses formidable public relations skills that can be used to emerge from the current negativity. And they write, quote, Braun has become known for his cushy relationships with editors and journalists across the industry, according to 6 Media Insiders. The attitude at one major entertainment outlet was, we don't speak badly about Scooter Braun and his clients. Because he is getting positive press. Nobody's really bashing him. Everybody that I've seen right now in the media, the mainstream media, the legacy types, you know, the big money, corporate, whatever, they're not saying anything bad about him. But there's obviously something going on here that is not good. The AP has the latest story I could find out about Scooter Braun. And here's what we know so far, that it's here. So far, no one has given any particular confirmation that they have left Scooter Braun yet when it comes to Justin Bieber, Demi Lovato, or Ariana Grande. They have all yet to be confirmed, but the stories are out there anyway. Without confirmation from artists, their teams, or Braun himself, changes to his roster are conjectural. An AP reached out to every artist listed as being managed under Braun's company on their official website and only heard back from a select few. A person familiar with SB Project's business dealings, was also not authorized to speak publicly, told the Associated Press the artists on the company's roster have day-to-day managers who are not Braun, and he consults with them. The person noted that no single person would be able to manage his roster of some of the biggest names of talent out there on his own. Now, representatives for Carly Rae Jepsen, Baby Jake, and Asher Roth have confirmed to Associated Press that those artists no longer work with Braun and haven't for some time. A person close to Idina Menzel told AP the singer is no longer managed by Braun, but was not authorized to speak publicly. A representative for pop star Ava Max confirmed that she is still being represented by Scooter Braun. Now, with some of these artists that are leaving, one of the things you have to probably consider is the fact that they'll probably be fine on their own, or they'll go to somewhere else. Because some of the artists that are going to stay with Scooter Braun, they haven't reached the peak of their careers, and there's probably still more opportunities for them. When you're talking about Callie, or Ozuna, or Ava Max, they're all artists that are still pretty new to the ether. Like, Ava Max only came into the space really, 2018 with Sweet But Psycho? And she's put out records. Mostly there's a lot of Eurodance feel to it, and they do perform well in Europe. She's only had a couple of songs, Kings and Queens, and, a couple of others that have done well, but she does okay in the UK, and she does well across Europe with some of the dance tracks that she does. I mean, she put out an album with Diamonds and Dance Floors. I don't think any of those songs really reached any particular level on the Billboard Hot 100. Like, some of the songs in the dance charts sure did, but not so much now. And that's okay. I like her music, by the way. I'm a fan. But I'm not one of those people that go to concerts. I wouldn't do that. It's not my thing. But when you look, okay, Demi Lovato, I don't know what to do, because I've always felt like she's been a bit mismanaged, because they really haven't found out what to do with her in the first place. After she came out and, being a very serious singer, when she gets, serious material, I think she performs pretty well. And I think she's done some records that have been like bops, and they've been pretty good. Sorry Not Sorry is one of the favorites that I like of hers. And then when I look at Justin Bieber, well, I mean, the guy's put out so much music, but I think that we also got saturated with Justin Bieber. And it's what I feel like has gone with him right now. So the break, unfortunately how it is one of those things that probably was warranted anyway for his career, that he needed to give him a break anyway, so he could put out, and maybe hopefully get some time to put out some better music, because some of the music he's had out there has kind of just been like, kind of disposable, not holding up as much. Peaches was a good song from the last album, Justice, but everything else, not so much. Just saying. In the meantime, Scooter Braun's been placing his focus on Hype America instead of acting as an artist manager. And that's where we are with that. I think there's nothing else we can say. We just have to follow along and see if there's anything more that comes of it. One other story I'll take over here. The artists that are currently managed by Scooter Braun, now this list probably will have changed somewhat, and we don't, again, know how much has been confirmed or not. But let's just go with it anyway. Here's what we got in the list so far. Justin Bieber, we already know. The Kid Laroi, who partnered with Braun in 2021 of June before leaving in September of that year to join Adam Lieber's Rebel Management roster. And then he rejoined Braun's team in May 2022. Quavo, who's part of Migos. Dan and Shay, the country artist, have done pretty well also crossing over into pop. Little Dicky, remember Freaky Friday with Chris Brown? Black Eyed Peas, who have been, constant. They were added to the roster in 2015, but, Black Eyed Peas have gone through a lot of changes. After Fergie left, they've put out some songs that have done okay, but mostly international. I mean, will.i.am is still pretty prominent right now doing music. He just put out a single with Britney Spears, Mind Your Business. Didn't do much for me, but at least we're seeing that Britney Spears is back out doing music again. That's good. Ava Max, she signed early 2023 with SP Projects. Ozuna just recently signed in June. Tori Kelly, who's been one of Braun's longest-term clients, signed with SP Projects back in 2013. The Zac Brown Band, YG, Andrew Watt. Those are some of the names we already know of that have been part of Scooter Braun. We have to wait for confirmation on all these stories to see what comes up with that and see if we're going to get anything for it at all. So we'll wait on that. We'll give it some time. Meanwhile, there's a particular story that I wanted to go ahead and get onto this that was quite interesting about Billboard that they put out that caught my attention. Pushing up songs, albums up the charts in a coordinated effort. So working against the Billboard algorithm to get songs up the charts. Elias Light puts on another great story and says that passionate fans will do anything, quote, within their power to make sure their beloved star wins big. So, for instance, Richmond, north of Richmond, the reason the song hit number one is because it had 150,000 units sold, roughly, 148,000 to be exact, and 15 million streams across all streaming platforms. But yes, Jason Aldean was able to go and get his song, try that in a small town, up to number one because of that result, because of the sales of the record. BTS has been notoriously known for doing that for Butter and for other songs that they had to get up to the chart number one for one shot and then go down. So there's a detail that are put on X, and this is what they wrote down. It's a plan for being able to go and get a record of the charts through sales. Quote, for each platform. Quote, we need to tackle Amazon, iTunes, and Qobuz, Qobuz, a French music service, expeditiously. For each platform, instructions describe a strict purchase regimen. One copy per version with new card / payment method / new email and a new IP address. Anyone hoping to execute this plan probably must plan ahead. Quote, you will need to have multiple new emails, prepaid debit cards like the Cash App card, e-gift cards you could buy at different Wi-Fi locations, cafes, gyms, friends, and neighbors' homes. And then you rotate through multiple burner emails, cards, and IP addresses. It's what there are people out there, I can't say who they are, if they're record labels or other companies or, publicity that's trying to maximize sales of a recent single. Blueprints like this one, Itemite are exacting, are increasingly common in social media and in fan forums, disseminated over the years by fans devoted to BTS, Nicki Minaj, Blackpink, Harry Styles, and more. Adam White, who was Billboard editor-in-chief in the 1980s, says that, quote, their popularity demonstrates a fundamental shift of the role that charts play in the modern music landscape. Before social media, the charts were primarily an industry concern. And the industry, retailers, record companies, radio stations were in a position to shape and influence those charts. But superfans have commandeered efforts to boost their acts' chart performance. Yeah, so they know they can get more control besides sales to get a song up the charts. Then they're going to have a concerted effort. Fan club, basically. Super fans are getting songs up the charts. Amazing. So that means more than anything about how there are not that many artists out there represented by big management to be able to get the record labels to go ahead and get songs up the charts. Sometimes you'll see an artist get a song up the charts, or single up there or two before an album comes out in the traditional sense. You look at Olivia Rodrigo's current album, Guts, coming out in a couple of weeks. So the first song was Vampire, got to number one for 1 week. In the UK, it never hit number one. And currently is in the top 10 still. But then you have the second song, Bad Idea Right, hits top 10, and Vampire goes up the charts back near the top 5. Other than that, if you're looking to see if either of those songs are going to hit higher up on the chart in the top 5 or even reach number 1, then the Guts album is going to be the reason for it. Because when the album comes out, it should be able to go ahead and create an album bomb that should spike those 2 singles that have already had play up the charts to reach top spot, which is exactly what they did when they put out her first album, Sour, after Driver's License was out there and reached for 8 weeks at number 1, and then Deja Vu, which reached for, a week or 2 at number 1, and then Good For You, which reached number 1 as well, I think for like a week, and that was it. But all those songs perform well, so the same formula goes into play, and that's pretty much a traditional formula for record labels anyway. The impulse often sets passionate fandoms on a collision course with any music industry body charged with measuring listener activity. In recent months, zealous fans have individually bought a great many digital downloads of the same song. A splurge that doesn't actually count towards the chart, because there's a limit on the number of purchases from a single consumer eligible each week. And then Billboard changed its chart rules. The rankings now exclude downloads from artists' web stores, which usually operate with far less limitations than iTunes or Amazon. That's unfortunate because if they're still buying the music, it should be counted, but devout listeners sometimes play their favorite artists in ways that run afoul of streaming platforms' rules. So, for instance, Bad Decisions, a BTS collaboration with Benny Blanco and Snoop Dogg, was the most popular track in the U.S. that week on the platform, on SoundCloud. But the same email noted that the song exhibits the suspect play pattern suggestive of abuse, and SoundCloud declined to comment. The DSPs, the Spotify's, Pandora's, Amazon's of the world, have to regulate their platforms, and if it creates these battles with the fan bases, various K-pop fan bases, for example, at most moments hate Spotify because they think Spotify is scrubbing too many streams off the overall stream counts. Coming up with creative ways to manipulate listening platforms and the charts they report to used to be the specialty record companies. Now, they mentioned before 1991, and 1991 is important, and if you are a listener of this program, you understand that in November 1991, Billboard made the ultimate change there was a change to the charts and how they were constructed, because when the Hot 100 was starting to get inundated with rap songs that had explicit lyrics and rock music that was a little bit too violent or too explicit for listeners, they decided to change the charts, because the top 40 was no longer the barrier for radio stations, because radio stations wanted to be able to go and play what they played. And it was indicative of what happened on the American Top 40 countdown, because Shadoe Stevens, hosting at the time, after November 91, they no longer utilized the Billboard Hot 100 chart and counted their top 40. They instead started counting the Billboard mainstream chart, which was much more sanitized, a little less likely for rap and rock songs to make that chart. And it would continue like that into the mid-90s, and they would then eventually go to Mediabase as the new source of what the chart data was being used for that program. That's where it kind of all lies in the play. Before 1991, Billboard sales charts were compiled by calling up a panel of retailers and simply asking what titles are selling. And by the way, SoundScan system was brought in 1991. So a digital or an electronic, computer system aggregating the sales. So it used to be the Billboard sales charts. You called up retailers asking what titles were selling. Record labels and distributors routinely use strong-arm tactics and bribery to sway the process in their favor. The New York Times reported in 2001 that Jeff Mayfield, then director of charts at Billboard, told the paper, quote, one distribution company president complained that some of his employees spent 2.5 work days per week trying to influence how stores reported. Now, SoundScan is now known as Luminate, which is still what the sales figures for Billboard are using. They brought in a new rigor of chart data collection by tracking the barcodes of CD sales. But it didn't stop labels from attempting to tilt the charts in favor of their acts. At the time, fervent fans would do what they could to impact charts, but their singles of doing so were limited. They could buy multiple copies of a CD, though that quickly becomes prohibitively expensive. And for charts like the Hot 100 that combine sales and airplay, that they could try to increase spins by calling up the radio station and requesting a song. And fans leverage over the charts has increased exponentially since then. Social media makes it far easier to mobilize a large number of geographically dispersed fans around a common goal. And now the charts incorporate streaming. Everyone with access to a computer or phone can listen to every waking hour and set a service to keep playing music when they're asleep too. And listen, if you want to explain how Jason Aldean and Oliver Anthony were able to get up to the top of the charts, yeah, the streaming services and the sales manipulation, you can say there was some of that embedded into the mix, baked into the cake, and it probably was to make those songs go to number one. Significantly, because if you look at the scoring that's I've been able to see in chart data, at chart data and at Talk of the Charts on X, they show you what the calculations are based on the airplay on a radio, streaming, sales, and they combine a score to that. And usually that number one song has a significant score, and they're able to go and kind of understand what the grade is in order for, the algorithm and what calculates to a score that makes it high enough for a song to be number one. Many modern fandoms are doggedly fixated on vocally competitive about commercial statistics. K-pop fans appear especially effective at organizing around specific chart goals. This mobilization process of these pop fan clubs, they resemble what would be a political action committee or a PAC, drawing scrutiny in the U.S. every election year. But anyway, the Hot 100 takes into account download, streams, and airplay. Downloads have not been the dominant driver of single success since 2014. And by the way, it's only in America. In the UK and other areas, they have their own proprietary charts. They don't have this problem. Very interesting in that. Maybe there is, but not so much to a scale. But it's only in the U.S. this happens. Just to keep that in mind. Which is part of the reason why radio is in such a bad place, because, the manipulation of this, it's manipulation nevertheless. And because radio doesn't want to do anything to inject what the charts have, they still have so much importance. And they can control what's going on. But obviously, these fans, they're fans that you should be having, that radio should be able to actually be able to attract and play their music properly. But radio has abandoned these super fans. Do you understand? Because BTS, we talked about years ago in this program. Let me remind you, BTS had their music, and I remember that was one of the episodes of the Broadcasters podcast that did very well, as a matter of fact. Like, I'll tell you, I can't see how many people actually listened to that particular day, but I'll tell you, I'm going to play back a little bit of what I talked about, the chart manipulation chatter, and what they did. So let's go and talk about that real quick. I'm going to go and play a clip from that. This is going back to, how far back is this now? Whew, this has got to be a while. This is August of 2021. Check this out.
BTS's history with Billboard is complicated. In 2018, their album Love Yourself, Tear, was their first number one album on the Billboard 200, the first for any K-pop album at the time. Collaborations with Western artists including Halsey, Lauv, Charlie XCX, performed relatively poorly on the Hot 100 for such a popular boy band. A number one was their ultimate aim, and it would take 2 years after their all-English Dynamite that would top the charts. Dynamite had all the ingredients for a smash hit. Catchy, a colorful music video, heavily played on radio, but radio took a little while to get to it. Even with BTS right now, I've been talking about that BTS was something that radio needed to get behind because of the stands that they have. The BTS army, to get them to be engaged in radio would be so important, but they're not doing it. I don't know why. Because maybe the group can't make their way over here. They can't give the proper promotion to come to America and, do concerts or do events for these said radio stations. I don't know. It could be that. During the song's trekking week, BTS released remixes, offered discounts, and sold vinyls and cassettes. Relied on their fan base to purchase, stream, and share as much as possible, and it paid off when the group finally achieved their elusive goal. But then it would continue that. Now, the song Butter, same thing happened again. So BTS would take advantage of every tool available to them. Instrumental versions, the physical editions. And other artists did the same thing beforehand. Taylor Swift putting a number one song up. Travis Scott relying on remixes, bundled sales, and excessive promotional campaigns to add a number one to their discography. But what made Butter so controversial is that based on most metrics, Good For You was undoubtedly the most popular song in the country. Simply put, Butter was a top song for just the BTS army, who spent over $100,000 in digital sales to boost the song.
And good for you, that was Olivia Rodrigo's song that got trumped by BTS. And then Billboard had to change the algorithm because BTS and their fan base was able to kind of work that through. That was, by the way, episode 189 of the Broadcasters Podcast, August 27, 2021, right there. Fascinating story. All in about this. Earlier this year, Jimin, who was part of BTS, actually drew close to 80% of the chart points for Like Crazy from downloads. And no one has topped that mark in recent history on a top 10 debut except for Jason Aldean, who earned 76% of his chart points from downloads when he debuted at number 2 with the controversial Try That in the Small Town. Try That in the Small Town was the number 2. Was it number 1? Was it? I think that's what happened. It was number 2. That's right. The music industry's future appears increasingly wrapped in those listeners who also happen to be big spenders, and the growth of streaming is slowing. Superfans, however, shell out 80% more money on music each month than the average U.S. music listener. Big money right there. So that's a lot right there we're looking at, which is quite interesting across there, but it's quite an interesting story right there nevertheless. Okay, I want to take a couple minutes to talk about the writer's strike and the actors. And comments have been made so far that the latest offer by the Writers Guild, which was leaked to the press, not yet good enough. So they told members Wednesday, the WGA, that the latest offer, not yet good enough, and that there were half a dozen areas where it believes the studios fall short in their offer. The studios are willing to enshrine the concept of a TV staff size in the contract for the first time. So the writers' rooms, they're willing to go ahead and cave in on that. But there are loopholes, limitations, and omissions in their modest proposal, too numerous to single out, making them effectively toothless. And they wanted to offer making streaming viewership data available only to a half dozen WGA staffers. The data can be used by the Guild to craft a proposal for a viewership-based residual in 3 years. So give them something, a carrot. Some staffers would get a chance to look at this viewership data, but that was it. Only a limited amount of people would find out that viewership data. In the meantime, no writer can be told by the WG about how well their project is doing, much less receive a residual based on that data. So they released proposals. The AMPTP put it out on Tuesday night. And so the AMPTP is trying to put pressure on Guild leadership by demonstrating both the writers and to the broader entertainment community. It's making significant concessions that the writers have not responded in kind. Yeah. But it's the first time in the 115-day strike that we're seeing this actually happen. So I'm surprised about seeing what they're going to do right there. But it's just starting to make amends to what the demands are that the writers have. And some writers are starting to think that maybe it's not too bad. One writer said that the AMPTP and the terms they offer look pretty good. For most writers, it looks decent. The fact that they made a very decent offer shows they're serious and they want to come to a resolution. But it's not enough anyway. The tone of the email to the Writers Guild members was more muted than the previous message. Now, the other parts of the proposal was a second step, a guaranteed rewrite for original screenplays under a certain income threshold. And that would only help a statistically tiny category of screenwriters as part of this. They also offer minimum terms for writers on comedy variety shows and streaming for the first time, and the Guild noted that would leave behind game show writers and daytime writers. They offered to make pension and health contributions for each member of a two-person writing team at the amount they would get if they were employed as individuals, but that would not apply to teams of 3 or more. And there have been real discussions and movement on the issue of AI, but the guilds demand that AI-generated material not be considered literary or source material, which would allow the use of AI material without impacting writers' pay or credits. They refuse, according to what the guild is saying, to representative that's saying this, quote, they continue to refuse to regulate the use of our work to train AI to write no content for a motion picture. But negotiations will continue. But they'll continue to advocate for proposals that fully address the issues rather than half measures like those mentioned above. Yeah. But you're seeing that the AMPTP now has to start putting out something. And by the way, that proposal actually goes back almost 2 weeks ago. That was just released to the press, but obviously there must be some more things that have already been more agreed upon or we're getting closer to. But The Alliance thinks this is a good way to go and pressure the Writers Guild and then thus the actors. No, it's not going to work. It's not. But that's what's going on with that. So Sean Ross at Radio Insight put a great story out. I want to bring this up real quick. Just a couple of things to talk about when it comes to competition in radio. Does a lack of competition make everyone better? Well, here's a couple of things he made a point about when it comes to the impact of competition. He says that the sort of marketing that went with formal format battles ended with the advent of personal people ratings measurement because broadcasters thought they no longer needed it. But then the resources were not there. Now we see the impact of less promotion on radio listening overall. Many wars of attrition remain. Direct format battles have often been replaced by adjacencies on a format spectrum. So in Los Angeles, they have 4 album-oriented rock stations at most times in the late 70s, but now you can hear their hits on a rock-leaning classic hit station like K-Earth, an adult hits outlet like KCBS, a gold-based active rocker like KLOS, but no dedicated classic rock. And mainstream stations that were prominent are continue to be taking out of circulation on a regular basis. We talked about the stations that decided to throw throwbacks into their format. And in Tampa, they have a station, WPOI, that's trying to make that change right now with CHR, with music that's mainstream and gold-based. So we have markets like Miami and Chicago that have a mainstream CHR and a gold-based CHR. And they haven't changed the landscape much, suggesting those changes read as modifications, not outright flips to the listeners. And stations like B96 and Hits 97.3 still play some currents. In some markets, CHR is alone and still in the 3 to 4 share range. But he says there's still programming solutions for CHR, hip-hop, alternative country, where wars of attrition still exist. Radio benefits from a big successful stations and the signal they send to listeners and to ourselves as broadcasters. It's better for broadcast radio as a medium to be able to offer local FM listeners one station in every music format, rather than 2 of some, none of others. And the competition would make everybody better at the moment is stations competing more vigorously against themselves and their own legacies. An interesting story from Edison, their on-demand share of ear service. They have learned that now linear audio. Edison Research tracks all forms of linear and on-demand audio. And in their latest quarterly report for second quarter of 2023, for the first time ever, on-demand audio or podcasting has passed linear consumption. So 50.3% of all daily audio time consumed in the U.S. by ages 13 and up are on demand, and they're not live. So nothing streaming, nothing radio. Linear platforms account for 49.7% of listening. So podcasting now and podcast listening is now more prominent for audio listeners than streaming or listening on the radio, AM, FM. The digital disruption continues to do its work. Incredible. So I got some other stories I could bring up. There was one that was interesting from Peter Bard talking about desperate times often lead to groundbreaking movies. Will they do so again? I'll probably table that for next week. But that's the show for tonight. I think we covered a lot of ground. Hey, man, I did a lot of work this week. I got on. We already talked about a lot of stuff on the episode I put out as an extra this week, plus this episode. So you're all covered up with the Broadcasters Podcast. You got more than enough to listen to for between now and the weekend, and I hope you get a chance to do so. And please pass along the word to others out there that if they haven't decided to yet, please have them go ahead and sign into Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and they can listen to the show themselves. Please consider that. I really would appreciate that. More than anything, follow all my content, kingofpodcasts.com, kingofpodcasts with an S.com. And remember, I'm on social media, X, Facebook, Instagram, Trends, TikTok, at King of Podcasts. And until next week, remember the content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.